Yeah! All right! Time for a little mean and green. Listen up! The Goblin Blade we're after is somewhere in this museum. Must deliver the Goblin Blade to Master Shredder as soon.
Gift shop's on the first floor, boys.
Not you!
Not you. But they don't take kindly to shoplifting.
I don't.
And 3. Ha! Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep!
How about that? Now I'm mad! Now I'm mad! How about that? Out of my
Shell Sweep! Shell
now
Sweep!
I'm mad! Out of my way, Nimrod!
Shell Sweep!
How about that?
Shell
Now I'm
Sweep!
mad.
That's gotta hurt!
Out of my
Shell
way,
Sweep!
Nim! Out of my
Shell
way,
Sweep!
Nimrod!
Shell Sweep!
Out of my way,
Shell
Nim!
Sweep!
Now I'm mad!
Shell
How
Sweep!
about that?
Shell
How about
Sweep!
that? Now I'm mad! Now I'm mad! Now I'm mad! How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way! Out of my way! Now I'm mad! Now-
Shell Sweep!
How about that?
Cowabunga!
How about that? Now I'm mad! How about that? Out of my way, Nim!
Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep!
Now I'm mad!
Boom, baby!
How about that?
Shell Sweep!
How about that? Out of my way, Nim! Now I'm mad!
Shell Sweep!
Out of my way,
Shell Sweep!
Nimrod!
Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep!
Now I'm mad!
Eat feet! Eat!
How about that? How about
Shell
that?
Sweep!
Now I'm
Shell
mad!
Sweep! Yeah!
How about that? Now I'm mad! Now I'm mad!
Shell Sweep!
How about that?
Boom!
How about Nimrod!
小 sweet!
How about that?
小 sweet!
Out of my way,
Shall sweet.
Nimrod! How about that? How about that?
小 sweet!
How about that? How about that? Now I'm mad.
Yeah, look out!
How about that? Out of my way! Now I'm mad. Now I'm mad. Out of my way! Out of my way, Nimrod!
小 sweet!
Now I'm mad.
小 sweet!
Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that?
Look out!
Now I'm
Eat
mad.
feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about that? Now I'm mad. Now I'm
Feet!
mad.
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat
Now I'm
feet!
mad.
Shall sweet!
Now I'm mad.
Shall
How
sweet!
about that? How about that?
Boom, baby!
How about that? How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod! Now I'm mad. Now I'm mad. Now I'm mad. Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that?
All
How
right!
about that? Out of my way, Nimrod!
Eat feet! Eat
How
feet!
about
Eat
that?
feet!
Out of my way, Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? Out of my
Oh
way,
yeah!
Nimrod!
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about that? Now I'm mad. Out of my way,
Eat
Nimrod!
feet! Eat feet! Boom! Shall sweet!
Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod! How about... Out of my way, Nimrod! Now I'm mad! How about that? Now I'm mad! Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod! Now I'm mad! How about that?
All
Now I'm
right!
mad! Out of my way, Nimrod!
All right!
Out of my
Boom, baby! Shall
Out of my
sweet!
way, Nimrod! Now I'm mad! How about
Boom!
that?
Shall sweet!
Out of my way, Nim! Now
Shall
I'm
sweet!
mad! How about that? How about that? Out of my
Shall
way,
sweet!
Nimrod!
Shall sweet!
How about that?
Shall sweet!
How about that?
Shall
Out
sweet!
of my way, Nimrod! How about that?
Boom!
Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? How about that? How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod!
Boom,
How about
baby!
that? How about that? How about that? How about
Look
that?
out!
Now I'm mad!
Oh yeah!
How about that?
Boom, baby! Shall sweet!
How about that?
Yeah! Shall sweet!
Now I'm mad! How about that?
Shall
Out of my
sweet!
way, Nimrod! How about
feet,
that?
eat feet.
How about that?
Eat
Out of my
feet.
way! How
Yeah!
about that? Out of my way, Nimrod! Now I'm mad!
Shall sweet!
Out of my way, Nimrod!
Ooh, that's gotta
Now
hurt.
I'm
Ooh,
mad!
that's gotta hurt. Shall sweet!
How about that? Out of
Shall
my way, Nimrod!
Shall sweet!
Now I'm mad! Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way!
Oh yeah!
Out of my way,
Shell
Nimrod!
sweep!
How about
Shell
that?
sweep! Shell sweep!
Out of my
Shell
way,
sweep!
Nimrod! Out of
Shell
my
sweep!
way, Nimrod! Out of
Shell
my way,
sweep!
Nimrod! Out
Shell
of my
sweep!
way, Nimrod! Now I'm mad!
Boom, baby!
Now I'm
Shell
mad.
sweep!
How
Shell
about
sweep!
that?
Shell
How about that?
Shell sweep!
How about that?
Eat
Out
feet!
of my
Eat
way,
feet!
Nimrod!
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat
Now I'm mad!
Ooh, that's gotta
How about
hurt!
Out of my way!
Look out!
Now I'm
Shell
mad!
sweep!
How about
Shell
that?
sweep!
How about that? Now I'm mad! Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? How about that? Now I'm mad!
Shell sweep!
How about
Eat
that?
feet! Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about
Eat
that?
feet!
Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that?
Boom!
How about that?
Shell
Out of
sweep!
my way, Nimrod!
Ooh, that's gotta hurt! Shell sweep!
How about that? How about
Look out! Look
How
out!
about that?
Yeah!
Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that?
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about that? How about that? Now I'm
Boom!
mad.
Shell sweep!
How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod! How about
Oh yeah! Need it! Yeah! Need it turn! Yeah! Need it turn! Eat feet! 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 Oh yeah! Shell sweep!
How about
Shell
that?
sweep! Shell sweep!
Now I'm mad.
Shell sweep!
How about that? Now I'm mad. How about
Oh yeah!
How
Shell
about
sweep! Ooh, that's
Out of
gotta
my
hurt!
way, Nimrod!
Shell sweep!
How about that?
Shell
How
sweep!
about that?
Shell
Out of my
sweep!
way, Nimrod!
Shell sweep!
Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? How about that? Now I'm
Shell
mad.
sweep!
How
Shell
about that?
sweep! Shell
How about
sweep!
that? Out of my way, Nimrod! Now
Look
I'm
out!
mad.
Shell sweep!
Now I'm mad. Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod!
Shell
Now
sweep!
I'm mad. How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod!
Shell
How about
sweep!
that?
Mycosaurus Rex!
How about that? Now
Need
I'm
it turn!
mad. Out of my now I'm
Boom,
mad.
baby!
Out of my way, Out of my way, Nimrod!
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat
Out of my
feet!
way,
Eat feet!
Nimrod.
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about that?
Oh yeah! All
How about
right!
that? How about that? Out of my
Look
way,
out.
Now I'm
Eat
mad.
feet! Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about that?
Shell sweep!
How about that?
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about that?
Yeah!
Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my
Shell
way,
sweep.
Nimrod!
Shell sweep!
How about that? How about that? Now I'm mad. How about that?
Yeah!
Now I'm mad. Out of my way, Nimrod!
Yeah! All right!
Now I'm mad.
Oh yeah!
Now I'm mad.
Shell sweep!
Out of my
Shell
way,
sweep.
Nimrod! How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? How about that? How about that?
Shell!
Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod! How about
Shell
that?
Sweep! Mycosaurus Rex! Shell Sweep! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet!
How about that? Out of my
Shell
way,
Sweep!
Nimrod! How
Eat
about
feet,
that?
eat feet, eat feet, eat feet!
How about that?
Shell Sweep! Shell
about-
Sweep! Shell
How about
Sweep!
that?
Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Ha! 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 Oh yeah!
Now
Shell
I'm
Sweep!
mad. Out of my
Shell
way,
Sweep!
Nimrod! How about that? How about...
Eat feet! Ha! Ha!
Out of my way! Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? Out of my way! Out of my way! Out of my way, Nimrod!
Alright!
How about that? How about that? How about that?
Look out!
Mad! Out of my way! Now I'm mad!
Boom, baby!
Now I'm mad.
Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep!
Out of my way, Nimrod!
Boom!
How about that? Out of my way! Out of my way, Nimrod!
Shell Sweep! Eat feet!
How about
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Ha! Ha!
Now
Ha!
I'm
Boom,
mad.
baby!
Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod!
Boom!
Now I'm mad! How about that? Out of my
Shell
way!
Sweep! Cowabunga! Shell Sweep!
How about that?
Shell Sweep! Cowabunga! Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Shell
Out of my
Sweep!
way, Nimrod!
Shell
about
Sweep!
that?
Eat feet!
How about
Eat
that?
feet! Eat feet!
How about that?
Yeah!
Out of my
Shell
way,
Sweep!
Nimrod!
Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Shell
How
Sweep!
about that?
Shell Sweep!
Out of my way!
Shell
Out of
Sweep!
my way, Nimrod!
Shell Sweep!
Now I'm mad! Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? How
Shell
about that?
Sweep!
How about
That's
that?
gotta hurt!
Now
Shell
I'm
Sweep!
mad. How about now I'm mad!
Oh yeah! Eat feet! Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Shell Sweep! Oh yeah!
Now
Shell
I'm
Sweep!
mad.
Shell
Out of my
Sweep!
way, Nimrod! Now!
Eat feet!
Out of my way, Nimrod!
Shell! Eat!
How about that? Now I'm mad!
Oh yeah!
How about that?
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat
Now
feet!
I'm mad!
Eat
How about
feet!
that?
Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about that?
Eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet!
How about that?
Shell Sweep!
Out of my way!
Shell Sweep!
How about that? Out of my
Shell
way,
Sweep.
Nimrod!
Oh yeah!
How about that?
Shell Sweep!
How about that? Now I'm mad!
Boom!
How about that?
Mycosaurus Rex!
How about that? Now I'm
Sorry! Ow! Sorry!
How about
Sorry! Booyah! Booyah!
now I'm mad.
All right!
How about
Look out!
out of my way, Nimrod!
Yeah! Oh! Boom! Look out! All right! Shell sweep! Cowabunga! Shell sweep! Cowabunga! Ooh, that's gotta hurt. Shell sweep! Yeah!
How about that? Out of my...
All right! Mycosaurus Rex!
Out of my way, Nimrod!
Oh yeah!
Ha!
Eat feet, eat feet! Boom!
Ha!
Eat! Ha!
All right!
Yeah!
Yeah!
Boom, baby! Oh yeah! Look out! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Look at Shell sweep! Shell sweep!
How about that?
Cowabunga! Oh yeah! Shell sweep! Ooh, that's got a Mycosaurus Rex! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! eat feet, eat feet. Yeah! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Look out! Yeah! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet. Yeah! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Yeah! All right! Yeah! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet. Shell sweet! Eat feet, eat feet, eat Mycosaurus Rex! Shell sweet! Shell sweet!
How about that?
Ooh, that's gotta hurt! Shell sweet! Shell sweet!
Out of my way,
Eat feet,
Nimrod!
eat feet, eat feet! Ooh, that's gotta hurt!
Out of my way,
Eat
Nimrod!
Eat feet!
How about that?
Shell sweet!
How about that? How about
Eat
that?
feet!
How about that? Now I'm mad! How about... Out of my way, Nimrod!
Eat
How about
feet,
that?
eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat
How about
feet!
that? Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? How about that?
Eat
How
feet,
about
eat
that?
feet! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Eat feet! Eat feet, eat... Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Look out! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Boom, baby! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Mycosaurus Rex!
Yeah!
Shell sweet! Ooh, that's gotta hurt! Boom! Look out! Yeah!
Just put the sword back, you stubborn turtles! This thing will take over from here!
Whoa!
What? It's just a...
sweet! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Shell sweet! Boom! 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 Oh yeah! Boom, baby! Boom, baby! Look out! Boom, baby! Shell sweet!
Yeah! How about that? How about that? Now I'm mad! How about that? How about that? Out of my way! Out of my way, Imra! How about that?
Shell sweet!
How about that? Out of my way,
Oh, yeah.
Imra! How about that? How about that?
Saurus Rex!
How about that? Out of my way! Out of my...
Shell sweet!
Out of my way, Nimrod!
Boom, baby!
How about that? How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that?
Yeah!
How about that? How about that?
Shell sweet!
How about that? How about that?
Look out! Shell sweet! Oh yeah! Look out!
Now I'm mad! Now I'm mad!
Look out!
How about that? Out of my way, Nimrod!
Boom!
How about that? Out of my way! Now I'm mad! How about that? How about that? Now I'm mad!
Sweet!
Out of my way, Nimrod! Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? How about that? How about that? Now I'm mad! Out of my...
Yeah!
Yeah!
啊  Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! 啊 Yeah! Look out!
Out of my way! Now I'm mad! Now I'm mad! How about that? Out of my way!
Look out! Yeah!
Ah!
Shell sweep! Look out! Shell sweep! Mycosaurus Rex! Shell sweep! Eat feet, eat feet, eat
Now
feet,
I'm
eat
mad.
feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet.
Ah!
Yeah, look out! Shell sweep!
Ah! Yeah!
Boom, baby! Yeah! Oh yeah! All right! Boom, baby! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Look out! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Yeah! Shell sweep! Boom, baby! Shell sweep! Oh yeah! Oh, look out! Need a turtle!
Yeah!
Boom! All right! Yeah! Boom, baby! Yeah! Boom, baby! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Oh yeah!
All right!
Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Ooh, that's gotta hurt! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Look out! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Look out! Cowabunga! Shell sweep! Oh yeah! Boom! 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 So sweet! Look out! Boom! Oh yeah! Shout! Oh yeah! Look out!
All right!
Yeah! Boom, baby! Boom! So sweet! Oh yeah! Yeah! All right! Boom, baby! Boom, baby! Look out! Look out! Boom, baby! Look out! So sweet! Mycosaurus Cowabunga! So sweet! Oh yeah! Look out! So sweet! Oh yeah! Yeah! So sweet! So sweet! So sweet! So sweet! Look out! Mean a turtle! So sweet! Mycosaurus! Ooh, that's gotta hurt! So sweet! So sweet! Yeah! So sweet! So sweet! Boom, baby! Boom! Shell sweep! Oh yeah! Shell sweep! Boom, baby! Yeah! Boom, baby! Eat it, turtle! Boom, baby! Isn't this the mark of the Foot Clan? What kind you let Mom get? Need it!
Out of my way, Nimrod! How about
Need it,
that?
turtle!
Now I'm mad! How about that?
Ooh, that's gotta hurt!
Out of my way, Nimrod!
All right! Need it, turtle! Boom! Look out! Oh yeah! Look out! Need it, turtle! Need it, turtle! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh! Need it, turtle! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Microsaurus! Let's go! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep!
Now I'm mad! Out of my way, Nimrod! How about that? Now
Oh yeah!
Now I'm mad!
Oh yeah! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet. Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Need a turtle! Oh yeah! Boom, baby! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Oh! Look out! Yeah! That's gotta hurt. Shell sweep! Boom, baby! Yeah! Look out! Oh yeah! Yeah! Look out! Just whip it, but well, that's good. Boom, baby! Look out! Look out! Yeah! Need it, sir. Yeah! Look out! Look out! Need it, sir. Oh yeah! Boom, baby! Yeah! All right! Need it, sir. Boom, baby! Oh yeah! Need it, sir. Look out! Oh yeah! Need it, sir. Oh yeah! Shell sweep! Oh yeah! Shell sweep! Boom, baby! Need it! Need it, sir! Look out! Boom, baby! Yeah!
Yeah! How about
Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet.
yeah? Ha! Yeah!
Shell sweep! Shell sweep! Ooh, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah! Yeah! Ha! Ha! Yeah! Yeah! Ha!
Yeah! Boom, baby! All right! Boom!
Yeah!
Look out! Yep. What could we look at this? Wait! Are you telling me that those things we've been fighting all this time are not monsters?
Who are you anyway?
You can talk? We're not with the Foot Clan.
Then what are you doing with those crystals?
Whoa, wait a minute! We found
Those crystals are the embodiment of...
We wanted to solve the myth.
You're really not with the Foot Clan?
Of course not!
I see. No.
So,
And so...
eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Eat feet, 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 eat feet! Look out! All right!
All right!
Eat feet! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Eat feet, 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 eat feet! Ha! Ha! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Ha! 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 Eat feet! Ha! Ha! Boom, baby! Ha! Eat feet, eat feet, eat feet! Ah! Ha! Ha!
Game over.
Yeah!
Mike is in his house!
I am so gonna enjoy this.